In nuclear race with Russia, Trump goes back to a Cold War future. After letting New START expire, Trump threatens to replace the era of arms control with a new arms race against Russia and China. By Aaron Mate. As if the lingering prospect of a new attack on Iran is not dangerous enough, the Trump administration is toying with a greater threat to global security. With Thursday's expiration of the New START treaty, the US and Russia no longer have any legal constraints on their arsenals of nuclear weapons. President Trump let the treaty collapse rather than accept a Kremlin offer to extend for 1 year the maximum possible. This removes the last formal constraint on a renewed arms race between two states that can already destroy the world many times over. There are unconfirmed reports that the two sides have reached an informal understanding to observe the treaty's terms for at least 6 months. And in a rare sign of progress, Moscow and Washington have announced a resumption of high-level military-to-military dialogue. The Biden administration suspended those contacts in late 2021 as Russia built up its forces on Ukraine's borders. Yet the news is far from reassuring. At a conference in Geneva today, the US Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, Thomas DiNanno, declared that extending New START's limits would not have been beneficial for the US or the world. In addition to capping nuclear warheads, the treaty included a robust verification mechanism that was already nullified thanks to the proxy war in Ukraine. In 2023, Moscow and Washington traded allegations that the other side was blocking inspections at nuclear weapons facilities. Moscow followed up by suspending those inspections entirely, accusing NATO of involvement in Ukrainian drone attacks against Russian bases with strategic bombers. 2 years later, that grievance was confirmed with Operation Spider's Web, the audacious Ukrainian assault that used smuggled drones to hit 4 bases inside Russia. By attacking Russia's strategic bombers on exposed tarmacs, Ukraine took advantage of Russia's obligations under New START, which require nuclear-capable aircraft to be easily observable in satellite imagery. US officials showed their gratitude by acknowledging that, quote, Ukraine's drone attacks could be viewed as a gift to the United States, the New York Times reported. As with Ukraine's other gift to the US, mass Russian casualties, the attack on Moscow's nuclear triad escalated what Biden privately called, quote, the prospect of Armageddon. Biden opted to fuel that prospect by refusing any new arms control talks with Russia. After initially signaling that he would accept Vladimir Putin's extension offer, Trump has continued in his predecessor's footsteps. In a post on Thursday, Trump explained that he seeks a, quote, new, improved and modernized treaty that can last long into the future. A long past provides ample grounds for pessimism. Putin was in power in 2001 when George W. Bush withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, ABM. Signed in 1972, the ABM capped US and Soviet strategic defense systems that counter nuclear-armed ballistic missile attacks. By limiting these defenses, both sides were disincentivized to develop new offensive nuclear weapons. Like Trump today, Bush called for a new framework that reflects a clean and clear break from the past, and especially from the adversarial legacy of the Cold War. Except Bush only grew more adversarial, spearheading construction of 2 so-called missile defense sites in Poland and Romania, and pushing through a NATO pledge of membership to Georgia and Ukraine. The US claimed that those missile sites were solely for defensive purposes. Moscow feared that the US sought to strike Russia first and disable its nuclear capability, thereby overcoming mutual deterrence. As the New York Times noted days before Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, the US bases in Europe, quote, can fire not only defensive interceptors, but also offensive missiles. The Polish site, the Times added, is, quote, only about 100 miles from Russian territory and barely 800 miles from Moscow itself. Ukraine, integrated as a NATO proxy since the 2014 Maidan coup and a potential site for similar military systems, is even closer. Moscow also remembers that Bush's ABM withdrawal was overseen by John Bolton, who later continued his arms control dismantling spree under Trump. In the president's first term, Bolton achieved a US withdrawal from two more accords: the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces (INF) Treaty, which eliminated an entire class of ground-launched nuclear and conventional weapons, and the Open Skies Treaty, which promoted compliance. Democrats, consumed with chasing the conspiracy theory that Trump was an agent of Moscow, offered little protest. By contrast, Malcolm Chalmers of the Royal United Services Institute, Britain's leading think tank, warned that Trump and Bolton had sparked, quote, the most severe crisis in nuclear arms control since the 1980s. By abandoning New START in his second term, which coincides with his impractical and costly plan for a so-called Golden Dome missile defense shield, Trump has now managed to top the severe arms control crisis of his first. Bolton can undoubtedly claim another victory. Quote, the next step in the bilateral relationship with Russia, he told the Conservative Political Action Conference 9 years ago this month, is for this administration to abrogate the New START treaty. That would be a signal to Vladimir Putin. Trump is also hoping to send a signal to China, which he wants to include in any new accord. The rationale was explained by another neoconservative, Trump veteran, former Secretary of State and CIA Chief Mike Pompeo. Since the New START treaty was brokered in 2011, Pompeo said this week, quote, Russia has firmly established itself as an American adversary and an all-round global menace. Moreover, Putin has formally aligned Russia with China, another American adversary, while China has massively expanded its own nuclear capabilities. As many observers have noted, China has no incentive to sign on to a mutual cap when its arsenal is far smaller than that of the US and Russia, who together account for 90% of the global nuclear stockpile. Yet in his remarks today, Di Nano, Trump's top official for arms control, also accused China of conducting secret nuclear testing and demanded that it join any new deal that the US reaches with Russia. Beijing and Moscow undoubtedly pay attention to other influential voices in Washington. The Heritage Foundation, the right-wing think tank responsible for the de facto Trump blueprint Project 2025, has called for a massive expansion of the nuclear arsenal. A recent Heritage report declared that the US nuclear community has reached a general bipartisan consensus that the United States needs more nuclear weapons, and soon. While it is unclear who comprises that community, there are grounds to claim bipartisan consensus. As I have previously noted, the Biden-era US military leader overseeing the nuclear arsenal, Admiral Thomas R. Buchanan, declared in November 2024 that the US is, quote, ready to prevail in nuclear conflict, so long as it puts us in a position to continue to lead the world. Buchanan did not grapple with the possibility that, in the event of a nuclear conflict with Moscow, there would be no world left to lead. At a Quincy Institute forum on Thursday, Thomas Countryman, the Undersecretary for Arms Control under President Obama, painted a grim picture. Quote, it's easier to believe the pessimistic scenario because so far we haven't seen the United States do anything, and I underline anything, in the last 10 years in the field of arms control. Countryman said, I haven't seen any action taken by his administration yet. There has been every opportunity to do so.